I truly believed this dinner would be different. There were new dishes, important guests, and my parents finally acting proud. Then my mother smiled, sweet as sugar, and pointed to a plastic folding table in the corner. She said the kids' table was perfect for me. Right then I realized this fancy dinner was never for family. It was a performance, and I was just the prop they planned to hide. My name is Michaela Hughes. I am 35 years old, and as I turn my car onto the familiar asphalt of simplistic suburbia outside Richmond, Virginia, I feel less like a successful marketing director and more like a defendant walking into a sentencing hearing. The engine of my sedan hums a low, steady note, but it does little to drown out the static noise of anxiety blooming in my chest. I check my reflection in the rearview mirror. My lipstick is a sharp, professional crimson. My blazer is tailored, structured, and cost me $600. It is not just clothing, it is armor. I am wearing it because I know exactly what kind of war zone I am entering. Even if the battlefield is disguised as a colonial-style house with manicured hedges and a freshly painted porch, I pull into the driveway, and the hierarchy of the family is already established by the parking arrangement. It is a blockade of metal and status. My brother's brand-new SUV takes up the prime spot, shining under the late afternoon sun like a trophy. Beside it sits my sister Paige's minivan, practical and maternal, a symbol of the grandchildren she has provided. My father's sedan is parked precisely parallel to the garage door, spotless and imposing. There is no space for me in the main drive. I have to park on the street, half on the grass, looking like a visitor who does not know the rules. The visual metaphor is so heavy-handed that I almost laugh, but the sound sticks in my throat. Everyone else belongs here. Everyone else has a designated slot. I am the variable that does not fit the equation. I kill the engine and sit for a moment in the silence. My hands are gripping the leather of the steering wheel so hard my knuckles have turned white. I force myself to breathe. In, out. I tell myself that I am an adult. I run a department. I manage budgets of over $2 million. I solve problems for a living. I can handle a dinner. I step out of the car, smoothing the front of my slacks, and walk up the concrete path to the front door. The house does not smell like my childhood. It smells like a magazine spread. As I step into the foyer, the scent of expensive vanilla candles and lemon oil polish hits me. It is aggressive in its perfection. The lighting is dim, curated by crystal lamps that scatter fractured rainbows against the beige walls. There is no clutter, no mail on the side table, no shoes kicked off by the door. It feels staged. It feels like they are preparing to sell the place, or perhaps they are hosting heads of state rather than their own children. My mother appears from the kitchen. She is wearing a dress that looks stiff, the fabric creating sharp lines against her body. She does not open her arms. She does not move in for a hug. She stops 3 feet away from me, her eyes scanning my outfit, my hair, and finally resting on my face. "You are late," she said. I check the heavy gold watch on my wrist. It is 5 minutes past 6 o'clock. Traffic on the interstate was backed up, I said, keeping my voice even. Her smile appears then. It is a terrifying expression, sweet on the surface but designed to bruise. It is the smile of a Southern woman who knows how to cut you without ever raising her voice. "We have important guests. Michaela," she says, turning her back to me before I can even take off my coat. "We wanted everyone settled before they arrived. Try to slip in without making a scene." She walks away, her heels clicking a sharp rhythm on the hardwood. I am left standing alone in the hallway, holding my purse like a shield. I can hear voices drifting from the living room. They are loud, performative voices. I recognize the baritone of my father. He is laughing, a booming sound that usually means he is trying to impress someone. I walk toward the living room, stopping just outside the archway. I can see them. My father is standing near the fireplace, holding a tumbler of amber liquid. My brother is next to him, nodding enthusiastically. Paige is seated on the sofa, her hands folded demurely in her lap, and there are others, 2 men and a woman I do not recognize, dressed in business attire, looking expensive and bored. "And this is Caleb," my father says. gesturing to my brother with a sweep of his hand. He just closed on that second property in the West End. We are incredibly proud. He has got the real estate instinct, just like his old man. The strangers nod politely. And Paige, my mother adds, gliding into the room with a tray of appetizers that look too complicated to eat. She manages the house and 3 boys. I do not know how she does it. She is a super mom. I wait for my name. I wait for the pause where they mention the 3rd child, the daughter who lives in the city, the daughter who just landed a massive promotion. I wait, but the air remains filled only with the praise of my siblings. I am not a part of this narrative. I am the editing room floor scraps. I step into the room. The conversation falters for a fraction of a second, then resumes as if I am invisible. My father glances at me, his eyes flickering with annoyance. Before turning back to the guests, I drift toward the dining room. Needing to escape the suffocating energy of the living area, the dining table is a masterpiece of exclusion. It is set for 8. The good china, the wedding china that we were never allowed to touch growing up, is laid out. Crystal wine glasses catch the light from the chandelier. There are cloth napkins folded into intricate swans. It is beautiful. I count the chairs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. My parents, my brother and his wife, Paige and her husband, the 2 important guests. 8 seats. I pause, confused. There is no seat for me. Then I turn my head. In the corner of the dining room, near the swinging door to the kitchen, sits a second table. It is a square, plastic folding table. It is visibly lower than the mahogany dining table. Around it are 4 tiny, colorful chairs, the kind you buy for toddlers. The table is set with paper plates. They are printed with cartoon superheroes. My stomach drops. It feels as if the floor has opened up beneath me. The humiliation is instant, hot and prickling against the back of my neck. I stare at the plastic table, trying to make sense of the geometry. I am 35. I am 5 feet 7 inches tall. My mother walks in behind me. She sees me staring at the setup. She does not look embarrassed. She looks entirely practical, as if she is explaining a zoning law. "Oh, good. You saw your spot," she said. I turn to face her. My voice feels trapped in my throat, but I force the words out. "Mom," I said, "what is this?" She adjusts a fork on the main table, shifting it 2 millimeters to the right. The main table is full. "Michaela," she says, her tone breezy and light, "we have Mr. and Mrs. Sterling here tonight. You know how important this network is for your father. We simply did not have the room to squeeze another chair in without crowding the guests." I look at the kids' table. I look at the tiny chair that will force my knees into my chest. "There are no children here tonight," I say. "Paige left the boys with the sitter. Caleb does not have kids yet. Who am I sitting with?" My mother sighs, a short exhale of impatience. "You will have the table to yourself," she says. "Think of it as having plenty of elbow room. It is just for tonight. Do not be difficult." She looks at me then, her eyes hard. It is a look I know well. It is the look that says, my comfort is a sacrifice she is willing to make for appearances. It says that I am the expendable asset. "Mr. Sterling is very particular," she whispers, leaning in as if sharing a conspiracy. "We need the main table to be cohesive." Cohesive. The word lands like a slap. I am not cohesive. I am the disruption. I feel the sting of tears threatening to surface, but I will not let them fall. I will not give her the satisfaction of a breakdown. If I cry, I become the emotional daughter. I become the unstable one. I become exactly what they want me to be so they can dismiss me. I swallow the lump in my throat. It tastes like ash. I look at the main table, gleaming with respect and adulthood. Then I look at the plastic table in the shadows. "Okay," I say. My voice is flat, mechanical. My mother smiles, satisfied. She pats my arm, a gesture that feels more like a dismissal than affection. "Good girl," she says. She turns and walks back to the living room to collect her real family and her important guests. I am left alone in the dining room. I walk over to the plastic table. The chair is yellow. It is made for a child who weighs 40 pounds. I lower myself onto it. The plastic flexes unsteadily under my weight. My knees hit the underside of the table, forcing me to sit with my legs sprawled out to the sides in an ungraceful V shape. My spine is hunched. I look ridiculous. I feel small, not metaphorically, physically. I pick up the paper plate. Captain Justice is printed on it, staring back at me with a heroic grin. I put the plate down. I place my hands in my lap. I stare at the empty doorway and wait for them to come in and see me like this. The message is not subtle. It is screaming in the silence of the room. You can wear the suit. You can make the money. You can drive the car. But in this house, you do not grow up. In this house, you are irrelevant. The boys rush into the dining room with the chaotic, unbridled energy of children who have been told to behave for too long. My nephews, Liam and Noah, stop dead in their tracks the moment they cross the threshold. They are 5 and 7 years old enough to understand the basic geography of a family gathering, but young enough to lack the filter that adults use to mask their cruelty. They look at the main table, glistening with silver and crystal, and then they look down at me, squeezed into a yellow plastic chair that is digging into my hips. "Aunt Michaela?" Liam asks, his voice shrill in the quiet room. "Why are you sitting in the timeout chair?" The question hangs in the air, heavy and suffocating. At the main table, conversation does not stop, but I see my sister Paige stiffen. She knows exactly why I'm here. She knows because she is sitting at the mahogany table, and I am not. I force a smile onto my face. Though it feels like the skin might crack from the effort, I refuse to let them see the humiliation burning in my gut. I will not teach them that exclusion is normal, and I certainly will not punish them for noticing the absurdity that their grandparents have orchestrated. "I am just hanging out with you guys tonight," I say, keeping my voice soft and steady. I thought the cool kids' table needed a captain. Noah frowns. Climbing into the tiny chair opposite me, he looks confused. "But you are a grown-up," he says. "Grown-ups sit with Granddad." I do not have an answer for him that is both honest and appropriate for a 7-year-old. So I simply pick up a breadstick from the paper plate in the center of our plastic table and break it in half. The sound is sharp, like a bone snapping. "Just for tonight," I say. I watch them settle in, their small legs swinging under the table, over their heads. I have a direct line of sight to the main table. It is like watching a movie through a window I cannot open. My mother is laughing at something the female guest, Mrs. Sterling, has said. It is her society laugh, a tinkling, practiced sound that signals she is charmed. My father is pouring an expensive red wine, the bottle cradled in a white linen napkin. They are eating prosciutto-wrapped melon and discussing interest rates. We have chicken tenders that are already growing cold in lukewarm apple juice. The contrast is not just physical, it is existential. Over there, they are people of substance, people who matter. Over here, we are the afterthoughts. The difference is that the boys are supposed to be here. They are children. I am 35 years old. I manage a department of 40 people. I pay a mortgage. Yet in this house, under the gaze of my parents, I am reduced to something less than an adult. I am a prop they have placed in the corner to ensure I do not clutter the stage. My father stands up then. He taps a silver spoon against his crystal goblet. The room falls silent. Even the boys stop chewing to look at him. He cuts an impressive figure. I will give him that. He looks like the patriarch of a dynasty, broad-shouldered and confident. "I want to propose a toast," he booms, his voice filling the room, "to family, to the roots that hold us steady and the ambition that drives us forward, and to success, which we are blessed to have in abundance at this table." He raises his glass. His eyes sweep the room. He makes eye contact with Mr. Sterling. He smiles at my mother. He nods at my brother, Caleb, and winks at Paige. His gaze moves across the room, and I wait for it to land on me. I wait for the acknowledgement, however brief, that I am part of this success, part of this family. But his eyes skip over me entirely. He looks through me as if I am made of glass. He looks at the wall behind my head and then sits back down. I feel cold. It is a deep, marrow-level chill. I lift my paper cup of water and take a sip, swallowing the bitterness along with the liquid. "Can you pass the juice, Auntie?" Liam asks. I reach for the pitcher of orange juice. It is heavy, and the handle is slick with condensation. As I hand it to him, his small, clumsy grip falters. The pitcher tips. It happens in slow motion. The orange liquid surges out, a tidal wave of citrus that splashes across the plastic table and cascades directly onto my lap. It soaks instantly into my silk blouse, turning the cream fabric a translucent, sticky orange. It runs down my slacks. It drips onto the floor. The room goes deadly silent. Liam gasps, his hands flying to his mouth. His eyes fill with instant, terrified tears. He looks at his mother at the main table, bracing himself for the scolding. "I am sorry," he wails, his voice trembling. "I am sorry. Auntie Michaela, I did not mean to." At the main table, my mother lets out a sigh that sounds like a tire deflating. She puts her fork down with a sharp clatter. "Honestly," she says, her voice cutting through the room, "can we not get through one meal without a mess?" I do not look at her. I look at Liam. He is shaking. He is 5 years old, and he is terrified because he made a mistake. I grab a handful of paper napkins from the dispenser. I do not worry about my $600 blouse. I do not worry about the sticky mess on my legs. I reach out and cover Liam's small hand with mine. "It is okay, Liam," I said immediately, my voice firm but gentle. "Look at me. It is just juice." "But I ruined your shirt," he sobs. "It is just a shirt." I tell him, "I can buy another shirt. It was an accident. You are not in trouble." I wipe his tears with a clean corner of the napkin. He looks at me, sniffing, and I see the relief wash over him. He leans into my hand. "Thank you," he whispers. The moment hits me with the force of a physical blow. This child, in his innocence, has shown more concern for my well-being in 10 seconds than my parents have shown in 10 years. He apologized because he hurt me. My parents hurt me intentionally, methodically, and they feel no remorse. They feel only annoyance that I'm not playing my part silently enough. The realization brings a sudden, terrifying clarity. I am done. I stop dabbing at the stain on my chest. It is pointless anyway. The silk is ruined. Just like this dinner. Just like my relationship with these people. I stand up. My chair scrapes loudly against the floor. My knees ache from being cramped. But I straighten my spine until I'm standing at my full height. I pick up the paper napkin I was using. I fold it. I fold it in half, and then in half again, creating a perfect square. It is the kind of precise, deliberate movement I use to close a business meeting. I place the folded napkin on the plastic table next to the puddle of juice. I do not look at the boys. I cannot look at them, or I might lose my resolve. I turn and walk toward the entryway. "Michaela?" My mother's voice stops me. It is not loud, but it is laced with that dangerous sweetness, the tone she uses when she wants to control me without alerting the witnesses. "Where are you going? We have not even served the entree." I keep walking. I pass the main table. I pass the crystal and the candles and the parents who made me feel small so they could feel big. "Michaela." She calls again, her voice sharpening just a fraction. "Are you being dramatic just because of a little spill?" "Sit down." I reach the archway that leads to the hall. I stop. I turn around slowly. I face them. I see my father, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth, looking annoyed. I see my mother, her smile tight and warning. I see the guests, looking uncomfortable. I do not raise my voice. I do not scream. I do not give them the angry explosion they can use to label me as hysterical later. "I am leaving," I said. My voice is clear. It carries to every corner of the room. "Enjoy your performance." I turn my back on them. I walk down the hallway. My hands are clenched so tight my fingernails dig into my palms, and my heart is hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but I do not stop. I open the front door and step out into the cool night air. Behind me, the house is silent. It is the silence of a stunned audience. It is the silence of a door finally, permanently locking. I drove without a destination in mind. My hands were still gripping the steering wheel with the same white-knuckled intensity I had used to keep myself from screaming in my parents' dining room. But the heat of my anger was beginning to cool. It was being replaced by something sharper, harder, and infinitely more terrifying. It was the cold clarity of recognition. For years, I had told myself that their behavior was accidental. I had told myself that they were just thoughtless, or old-fashioned, or perhaps I was simply too sensitive. But as the streetlights of Richmond blurred into streaks of neon yellow and white against the windshield, that delusion finally shattered. You do not accidentally seat a 35-year-old woman at a plastic table intended for toddlers. You do not accidentally overlook your own daughter while toasting the success of strangers. It was not a mistake, it was a message. I found myself pulling into the gravel lot of a place called the Bluebird Grill. It was one of those 24-hour diners that exist on the periphery of respectable society, a beacon of fluorescent light for long-haul truckers, shift workers, and holiday strays like me who had nowhere else to go. The sign flickered with a rhythmic buzz, the blue neon bird flapping its wings in a jerky, mechanical loop. I cut the engine and sat there for a moment, listening to the ticking of the cooling metal. I looked down at my blouse. The orange juice stain had dried into a stiff, sticky map of my humiliation. I did not care. I grabbed my purse and stepped out into the night air. Inside, the diner smelled of frying bacon, old coffee, and lemon disinfectant. It was a comforting, honest smell. There was no pretense here, no crystal goblets, no linen napkins folded into swans, no performative toasts to family unity. I slid into a booth in the back corner, the red vinyl squeaking beneath me. The table was formica, chipped at the edges, but it was sturdy. It did not wobble. It was an adult table. A waitress appeared almost instantly. She was a woman in her 60s with hair the color of steel wool and lines etched deep around her eyes. Her name tag read Brenda. She held a glass pot of coffee in one hand and a mug in the other. She did not ask if I wanted a menu. She did not ask why I was wearing a $600 suit stained with juice on a Tuesday night. She simply looked at my face, read the devastation written there, and set the mug down in front of me. "Coffee," she said. "It is fresh." "Thank you," I whispered. She poured the dark liquid, the steam rising up to warm my face. She left a few plastic creamer pods on the table and walked away, giving me the privacy I desperately needed. It was a small kindness, a transaction of basic human decency that felt monumental after the emotional starving I had just endured. A stranger in a roadside diner had offered me more dignity in 30 seconds than my own mother had offered me in a lifetime. I wrapped my hands around the warm ceramic mug and took a sip. Then, I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I needed to see it. I needed to verify that I was not crazy. I opened my photo gallery. I started scrolling back. I moved past the recent photos of my work presentations, my apartment, my cat. I scrolled back to last Christmas. There was a group shot of the family in front of the tree. My brother Caleb was in the center, his arm around his wife. Paige was on the other side, holding her youngest son. My parents were seated in front, looking regal. And there I was. I was standing on the far left edge. In fact, I was only half in the frame. My shoulder and half of my face were visible. The rest of me had been cropped out to center the others. I scrolled back further. Thanksgiving, 2 years ago. The table was set beautifully. Everyone had a place card. I zoomed in on the photo. My place card was not even handwritten. It was a sticky note slapped onto a napkin. I went to my text messages. I searched for keywords. I typed in the word job. A message from my father dated 3 years ago appeared. He wrote that it was cute that I had my little marketing job, but I should really think about finding a husband so I could settle down like Paige. Little job. I was managing a budget larger than his retirement fund at the time. I searched for the word adult. A message from my mother appeared. She was explaining why I could not bring a +1 to my cousin's wedding. We only have space for real adults. Michaela, you know, married couples. It would be awkward for you to bring a friend. I put the phone down on the table. My hands were shaking, not from sadness, but from a sudden, nauseating realization. I had spent my entire adult life trying to decipher a code that was never meant to be cracked. I thought if I just achieved more, if I dressed better, if I earned more money, if I was kinder, quieter, more accommodating, they would finally see me. I thought I was auditioning for a seat at their table. But the role had never been open. It was a system. It was a carefully constructed architecture of exclusion designed to keep me in a specific place. They needed me to be the failure so they could be the successes. They needed me to be the child so they could be the wise elders. They needed me to be the mess so they could be the perfect family. By staying and tolerating it, by sitting at the kids' table and smiling through the insults, I was not keeping the peace. I was validating their narrative. I looked at the coffee swirling in my mug. I thought about the boys, Liam and Noah. I thought about how quickly they would learn this lesson if I stayed. They would learn that Aunt Michaela was lesser. They would learn that it was okay to treat people like furniture. I picked up my phone again. I opened the family group chat. The last message was from my mother. A photo of the dessert I was currently missing, captioned simply with the words, "Glorious evening." I did not type a paragraph. I did not write a manifesto explaining my feelings. They did not deserve my feelings. They had lost the right to my vulnerability the moment they pointed to that plastic chair. I went to my camera roll. I found the photo I had taken right before I sat down. I had snapped it in a moment of sheer disbelief, thinking I would send it to my best friend later to ask if I was hallucinating. It was a stark, high-definition shot of the yellow plastic table, the superhero plates, and the tiny chairs, sitting in the shadow of the main dining table. I attached the photo to the chat. Then I typed a single sentence. It was not a question. It was not a plea. It was a resignation letter. I am done auditioning for a role you refuse to give me. I stared at the words. They looked dangerous. They looked permanent. Sending this message was an act of war. It was burning the bridge while I was still standing on it. But then I remembered the feeling of my knees hitting the underside of that plastic table. I remembered the silence of my father as he looked through me. I pressed send. I watched the blue progress bar slide across the screen. Delivered. Almost immediately, 3 dots appeared. Someone was typing. Then another set of dots. They were reacting. The phone buzzed in my hand. A call was coming in. It was my mother. I did not answer. I did not decline the call. I did something I had never done in my life. I held the power button down on the side of the phone. I watched the screen fade to black. The buzzing stopped. The dots vanished. The connection was severed. I sat there in the silence of the Bluebird Grill, the phone sitting like a black brick on the Formica table. I took a deep breath. The air in the diner tasted like grease and stale coffee. But to me, it tasted like oxygen. I drank the rest of my coffee. I left a $20 bill on the table for Brenda, covering the coffee and the silence she had gifted me. I stood up and walked toward the door. My chest felt tight, but it was a different kind of tightness now. It was the adrenaline of the free fall. I was terrified. I had no idea what tomorrow would look like. I had no idea what the fallout would be. I knew they would come for me. I knew they would not let their prop walk off stage without a fight. But as I pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped back out into the neon-lit night, I realized that for the first time in 35 years, I was walking on my own 2 feet. I felt fear. Yes, it was cold and sharp, but walking right beside it, holding its hand, was freedom. And that was a trade I was finally willing to make. The morning sun did not bring clarity. It brought a headache that throbbed behind my eyes like a second pulse. I had slept for maybe 3 hours, tossing on top of my duvet in my apartment, listening to the silence of my turned-off phone. It sat on my nightstand, a black rectangle that I knew was holding a digital bomb. I made coffee first. I needed the caffeine to fortify my blood before I faced them. I stood in my kitchen, watching the steam rise, delaying the inevitable. Finally, at 8 o'clock, I picked up the phone and held the power button. The screen lit up. The Apple logo appeared, innocent and white. Then the avalanche started. The phone vibrated continuously for a full minute. It buzzed against my palm like an angry insect. Notifications stacked up on the lock screen, overlapping each other until they became a blur of names and urgent punctuations. 37 text messages, 12 missed calls, 5 voicemails. I sat down at my kitchen island and began the forensic work of reading my own indictment. The first messages were from my father. They were not questions. They were commands. Call me immediately. The first one read, sent 10 minutes after I had left the house. Mr. Sterling is asking where you went. You are making us look ridiculous. Come back and apologize. You have ruined a critical networking opportunity for your brother. I expect you to fix this. There was no inquiry into why I had left. There was no acknowledgement of the humiliation of the plastic table. There was only the furious demand of a director whose prop had walked off stage in the middle of a scene. I scrolled down to my brother Caleb's messages. His tone was less authoritative but equally dismissive. You always have to make it about you, don't you? Mom is crying in the kitchen. I hope you're happy. It was just a seat. Michaela. Grow up. Then Paige, my sister, who had watched me wipe orange juice off my silk blouse while she sat at the mahogany table. You embarrassed us in front of the Sterlings. The boys are confused. Why are you like this? You could have just eaten quickly and left if you were that upset. You did not have to make a scene. I put the phone down on the cool granite counter. The words swam before my eyes. Why are you like this? It was just a seat. You embarrassed us. I realized then that they were not angry that I was hurt. They were not texting to explain a misunderstanding. They were policing the consequences of my reaction. To them, the sin was not the act of degrading me. The sin was my refusal to accept the degradation silently. They wanted the Michaela who smiled and sat where she was told. They wanted the version of me that absorbed their insults, so they could maintain their image of a perfect, successful family by leaving. I had shattered that image, and that was the only injury they cared about. The phone buzzed again. A new message. I braced myself for another attack from my mother, who had been conspicuously silent in the text thread, likely because she was busy playing the martyr to my father. But the name on the screen was not my mother. It was Harper. I frowned. Harper was my 14-year-old niece, Paige's eldest child. She had not been mentioned last night. My mother had bragged about Paige's 3 boys, the rowdy sons who carried the family name, but she rarely spoke of Harper. Harper was quiet, artistic, and deeply observant, traits that, in my family, rendered you invisible. I opened the message. It was short. They do this to me too. Just quieter. I saw the table. I am glad you walked out. The breath left my lungs in a rush. I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over. They do this to me too. Suddenly, the memory of the dinner shifted. I realized why I had not seen Harper. She was probably upstairs, or seated in another room, or perhaps she had been silenced so effectively that I had not even noticed her absence from the narrative my mother was spinning. It hit me like a blade wrapped in cotton. This was not just about me. This was not just a personal vendetta my parents held against their middle child. This was a system. It was generational. They were doing to Harper exactly what they had done to me, erasing her, minimizing her, pushing her to the margins because she did not fit the mold of loud, aggressive success that my father valued. I felt a surge of nausea, followed by a fierce, protective anger. I could handle their cruelty toward me. I was 35. I had armor, but Harper was 14. She was still forming her sense of self, and they were chipping away at it with the same chisels they had used on mine. My phone rang in my hand, startling me. I looked at the screen, expecting my father's name again. It was Aunt Lorraine. I froze. No one spoke to Aunt Lorraine. She was my father's younger sister, the black sheep who had stopped attending family gatherings 5 years ago. The story, according to my mother, was that Lorraine was difficult and bitter about my father's success. We were tacitly forbidden from contacting her. I slid my thumb across the screen to answer. "Hello?" My voice was raspy. "Michaela." Lorraine's voice was clear, sharp, and devoid of the southern sugarcoating my mother used. I heard what happened. "Harper texted me." "Harper talks to you?" I asked, surprised. Lorraine laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Someone has to tell that girl she is sane. God knows her mother will not. Listen to me. Michaela, I am going to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting." "Okay," I said, sitting up straighter on the stool. "You think last night was just an insult?" Lorraine said. "You think they just thought you did not matter enough for a real chair. But it is worse than that. It is a strategy." "What do you mean?" "For the last 6 years," Lorraine said, her voice dropping lower. "Every time you are not in the room, your mother tells people you are unstable. The rooms seem to tilt." "What?" "She tells them you are fragile," Lorraine continued. "Relentless. She tells extended family, friends, business associates. She says you have emotional episodes. She says you get overwhelmed by large groups and that you prefer to be alone. She paints this picture of a struggling, neurotic daughter that she has to protect." I felt the blood drain from my face. My mind flashed back to the way my mother had whispered to me the night before. "Mr. Sterling is very particular. We need the main table to be cohesive. That is why they put you at the kids' table." "Michaela," Lorraine said, "it was not just disrespect. It was performative pity. If anyone asked why a grown woman was sitting with the toddlers, your mother could just sigh and say, 'Oh, that is just Michaela. She needs her space. We let her sit there so she feels safe.' It makes them look like saints for tolerating you, and it invalidates anything you might say about them later because, well, poor Michaela is just not right in the head." I sat in stunned silence. The cruelty of it was breathtaking in its precision. It explained everything. It explained the pitying looks from distant cousins. It explained why my professional accomplishments were always greeted with surprise rather than pride. They had been undermining my credibility for years, planting seeds of doubt in everyone's mind, so that if I ever did stand up for myself, like I had last night, it would just look like another one of my episodes. My father's text message from this morning flashed in my mind. "You are making us look ridiculous. Not, you are hurting us, but you are damaging the brand." "Michaela?" Lorraine asked. "Are you still there?" "I am here," I said. My voice sounded different to my own ears. It was colder, less shaky. "Do not let them gaslight you," Lorraine said firmly. "You are the most stable person in that family. That is why they are terrified of you. You are the only one who sees the truth." "Thank you, Aunt Lorraine," I said. "I really mean that. Call me anytime," she said, "and tell Harper she is a good spy." I hung up the phone. The kitchen was quiet. The coffee in my mug had gone cold. I did not cry. I expected to. I expected to feel that familiar crushing weight of rejection, the sadness of a daughter who just wants to be loved. But the sadness was gone. It had been burned away by the revelation of their betrayal. They had not just neglected me, they had actively campaigned against my reputation to serve their own ego. They had weaponized my silence. I stood up and walked to my home office. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I pulled a fresh legal pad out of the drawer and clicked a black pen into the active position. If they wanted to treat this like a strategic operation, then I would oblige them. I was not a child sitting at a plastic table anymore. I was a marketing director who specialized in crisis management and brand repositioning. I knew how to build a case. I wrote the date at the top of the page. Then I wrote a heading, "The Record of Facts." I started writing. I wrote down the date and time of the dinner. I wrote down the exact quote my mother had used about the table. I wrote down the names of the guests. I transcribed the text messages I had received this morning. Word for word. I noted the time Harper had texted me. I made a note of Lorraine's revelation about the unstable narrative. I was done being the prop. I was done being the victim. If they wanted a war, They were about to discover that they had severely underestimated the opposition. I turned the page and kept writing. My living room had transformed from a sanctuary into a war room. The coffee table, usually home to art books and coasters, was now covered in stacks of paper, printed screenshots, and a timeline that spanned 2 decades. I was not crying. I was not pacing. I was operating with the cold, forensic clarity of a detective building a homicide case, except the victim was my own self-respect. I organized the evidence chronologically. I printed out the text exchange from yesterday. I printed the email from 3 years ago where my father had casually mentioned that I should not worry about investing because my future husband would handle the finances. I found the group chat logs from the Christmas I was excluded from the main itinerary. I taped them to a whiteboard I had dragged in from my home office. Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit C. It was terrifying to see it all laid out. When these moments happened in isolation, they were easy to dismiss as quirks or bad moods. But arranged in a line, they formed a clear, undeniable architecture of suppression. They had built a box for me, and every time I tried to step out of it, they hammered me back down with guilt or dismissal. Next, I drafted the boundary list. I treated it like a contract for a high-stakes merger. I did not use emotional language. I did not use words like hurt or sad. I used terms of engagement. 1. All family gatherings will feature equal seating for all adults. No exceptions. 2. My career is a topic of respect, not ridicule. If it cannot be discussed with the same weight as Caleb's real estate ventures, it will not be discussed at all. 3. For the next 6 months, I will not attend any events at your home. We meet on neutral ground, or we do not meet. I read it over. It was clean. It was enforceable. At 10 o'clock, I logged onto a video call with Dr. Evans, my therapist. I had requested an emergency session. Not to cry, but to strategize. I am not going there to beg them to love me. I told her, my voice steady. I am going there to inform them of the new terms of service for having access to my life. Doctor, Evans nodded, her expression serious. Be prepared for the pushback, she warned. When you change the steps of a dance you have been doing for 30 years, the other dancers will trip. They will blame you for the stumble. We practiced my responses. We role-played the inevitable gaslighting. When they say I am being dramatic, I will say, that is your characterization, not a fact. When they say I am ruining the family, I will say, I am protecting my place in it. When they bring up my past instability, I will say, my reaction to disrespect is not a symptom of mental illness. It is a symptom of self-respect. By noon, I felt armored. I called Tessa. She picked up on the first ring. I am doing it. I said, good, she replied. Her voice was the solid ground I needed. Do not let them interrupt you. Do not let them make you small. If you need an out, you text me the word pineapple, and I will call you with a fake emergency that requires you to leave immediately. You are my anchor. I told her, always. She said, go give them hell. Michaela. My next call was to a man named Daniel Rusk. He was not a shark. He was not the kind of lawyer you hired to destroy someone in a courtroom. He was a mediator who specialized in high-net-worth family disputes and inheritance conflict. He understood that in families, the currency was rarely just money, it was power. I explained the situation to him. I told him about the financial documents I had vaguely remembered signing years ago. The ones Aunt Lorraine had hinted might be more significant than I realized. I told him about the public narrative of my instability. I need you to look into the trust structure. I said, and I need you to be on standby. If this meeting goes sideways, I need to know exactly what leverage I have. Daniel listened without interrupting. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm and reassuring. I will pull the records, Michaela, he said, but be careful. When you start turning over rocks in a family like this, you rarely find just dirt. You usually find snakes. I thanked him and hung up. Then came the hardest part, the invitation. I opened a blank document on my laptop. I typed out a single page titled, Family Conversation Framework. It looked like a boardroom agenda. Rule 1. One speaker at a time. Rule 2. No character attacks. We discuss behaviors, not personalities. Rule 3. If voices are raised, the meeting ends immediately. I saved it as a PDF, then I opened the family group chat. It had been silent since I left the group, but I knew they were all still there, waiting for my apology, waiting for me to come crawling back so they could magnanimously forgive me and put me back in my box. I did not apologize. I typed, "We need to resolve what happened last night. I am not willing to discuss this over text or at the house. I have reserved a private room at Crown and Cedar for tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. Attached is the agenda for the conversation. Please confirm your attendance." The reaction was immediate. My phone lit up with a message from Caleb. Michaela's meltdown continues. He wrote, "Now she wants to summon us to a restaurant like she is the CEO of the family. This is ridiculous." My father chimed in seconds later. "We can discuss this at home." Michaela, "There is no need to involve strangers or spend money on a private room. Come over for dinner Sunday and we will talk." They were trying to pull me back to their turf. They wanted me in the house where the hierarchy was built into the furniture, where the photos on the walls reinforced my exclusion. I did not take the bait. I did not get angry at Caleb's insult. I typed back, my fingers moving with precision. "This is not a meltdown. This is a boundary meeting. I will not be coming to the house. If you want to have a relationship with me moving forward, you will meet me at Crown and Cedar. If you choose not to come, I will take that as your decision to sever ties." Silence followed. It stretched for 5 minutes, then 10. They were talking amongst themselves. I knew. They were likely calling me ungrateful, crazy, difficult, but they were also curious, and they were worried. They had never seen me draw a line in the sand with concrete instead of chalk. Finally, a message from my mother. "Fine, we will be there. But I hope you know how much you are hurting your father." I ignored the guilt trip. It was just another hook, and I was not biting. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing the final piece of my arsenal. I took the most damaging screenshots, the ones where they mocked my career, the ones where they discussed my instability to extended family members that Lorraine had forwarded to me, and I printed them on high-quality paper. I put them inside a thick manila envelope. I sealed it. On the front of the envelope, in bold black marker, I wrote a simple warning. "If you lie, I open this." I placed the envelope in my leather portfolio next to the printed agenda. This was my insurance policy. I did not want to use it. I wanted them to own their behavior without me having to rub their faces in the evidence. But I knew better than to go into a negotiation without leverage. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back was tired. Yes, there were dark circles under her eyes, but there was something else there, too. A steeliness that had not been there yesterday. I was done being the daughter they kept at the kids' table. Tomorrow, I would sit at the head of the table, and they would have no choice but to listen. The digital ambush began before I had even finished my morning coffee. I opened my laptop to check my work email, but a notification from a social media platform caught my eye. It was a post from my mother. She had not tagged me directly, which was her signature move. Direct conflict left a paper trail. Vague booking left only an impression. The post featured a photo of a single, wilting white rose against a black background. The caption was a masterpiece of performative martyrdom. "Please keep our family in your prayers during this difficult season," she wrote. "Sometimes, the people you love the most are the ones who break your heart. We are dealing with a crisis of spirit and asking for privacy as we navigate this painful disruption. A mother's love is unconditional. Even when it is rejected, it had been up for 2 hours. It already had 43 comments. Praying for you. Janice, one read, stay strong. Children can be so ungrateful. Read another. Here if you need anything. Don't let the enemy win. I stared at the screen, feeling the cold slide of anger in my gut. She was controlling the narrative. By framing my departure as a crisis of spirit and herself as the rejected mother, she had successfully cast me as the villain without ever speaking my name. She was preempting my truth with her tragedy. Then came the flying monkeys. My phone started buzzing with messages from extended relatives, the people who only saw the curated version of our lives. Aunt Linda, who lived in Florida and had not seen me in 3 years, sent a long paragraph. "Your mother is devastated. I do not know what is going on, but you need to be the bigger person. Family is everything. Call her and make peace." My cousin Steve sent a shorter, more aggressive note. "Whatever you did, fix it. Grandma is upset." I realized then that the fight I was preparing for at the restaurant was not just about a seating chart or a specific insult. It was a battle for the truth. If I walked into that meeting tomorrow without addressing this, I would be walking in as the unstable daughter who caused a scene. I would be fighting uphill against a mountain of lies they had already built. I needed to nuke the mountain. I opened my email client. I composed a new message. In the recipient field, I added every aunt, uncle, and adult cousin on my father's side. I added the close family friends who were commenting on my mother's post. I did not write a novel. I did not write an emotional plea for understanding. I wrote a press release. Subject: clarification regarding the family crisis. Dear family, I am seeing a lot of concern regarding my mother's recent post about a family crisis. I appreciate the prayers, but I want to ensure you are praying for the right thing. There is no crisis of spirit. There is no rejection of love. There is simply a boundary being set. On Tuesday night, I was invited to a formal family dinner to celebrate my brother's success. Upon arrival, I was informed that while the other 7 adults, including guests, would be seated at the dining table, I would be seated alone at a plastic children's folding table in the corner. I am 35 years old. I am a marketing director. I declined to be humiliated in my own parents' home and excused myself. That is the extent of the crisis. I have attached a photo of the seating arrangement for your reference. I attached the photo, the stark, undeniable image of the yellow plastic chair and the superhero plate sitting in the shadows of the crystal-laden main table. I clicked send. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was brief. 10 minutes later, my phone pinged. It was not a reprimand. Holy cow. My cousin Sarah wrote, "Is this real? They actually made you sit there?" I replied, "Yes, it is real." "That is insane," she wrote back. "I always thought they treated you like an intern, but this is next level. I am so sorry. Michaela." Then an email from Mrs. Higgins, a neighbor who had known me since I was 6. "Michaela, I just saw your email. I had no idea. Your mother told me you were having an episode and needed space. I feel terrible for assuming she was telling the truth. You deserve better." The narrative was cracking. The vague, holy fog my mother had pumped into the room was being blown away by the sharp wind of evidence. Then, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed a name that made my stomach tighten. Paige. I hesitated. My sister was the golden child's primary reinforcement. She was the one who benefited most from the hierarchy because she played by every rule my parents set. I answered the call but said nothing. "Michaela?" Her voice was shaking. "I am here," I said. "I got the email." She said. Her breath hitched. "Everyone got the email. Mom is freaking out. She is screaming at Dad that you are trying to destroy her reputation. I did not destroy anything." "Paige," I said calmly, "I just turned on the lights. If the room looks dirty, that is not the fault of the light switch." There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear her breathing, ragged and uneven. "I should have said something," she whispered. The admission hung between us, rare and fragile. "Yes," I said, "you should have. You were sitting 10 feet away. Paige, you watched your nephews spill juice on me. You watched Mom point to that plastic chair. You said nothing." "I know," she said, and I heard the tears in her voice now. "I know, but you have to understand. It is so hard to be perfect for them. It is exhausting. And when they are focused on you, when they are picking on you, they are leaving me alone." I closed my eyes. There it was, the ugly, naked truth. It was not that she agreed with them. It was that my suffering was her shield, as long as I was the disappointment. She could remain the star. As long as I was the unstable one, she was the reliable one. I did not stop it because it benefited me, she said, her voice barely audible. I am so sorry. Michaela. I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. I did not want her apology. Apologies were cheap. I wanted change. I'm not asking you to fix the past. Paige, I said, I am asking you about the future. What do you mean? She asked. We are meeting tomorrow at Crown and Cedar. I said, I am going to confront them. I am going to lay out terms, and they are going to lie. They are going to say it was a joke. They are going to say, I am remembering it wrong. They are going to look at you to back them up. I paused, gripping the phone tight. So I am asking you one question. I said, are you willing to tell the truth in that room? The line went silent. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. The silence stretched until I thought she had hung up. The old Paige. The Paige who needed their approval like oxygen. Would have made an excuse. She would have said she did not want to get involved. I do not know if I can. She stammered. Dad is going to be furious. He is already furious. I said, the only difference is whether you are on the side of the lie or the side of the truth. You have a daughter. Paige, Harper sees everything. Do you want her to learn that cowardice is the price of admission to this family? I heard a sharp intake of breath. The mention of Harper had landed. Okay, she said. The word was small, terrified, but distinct. Okay? I repeated. Okay, she said, stronger this time. I will say it. I will tell them I saw it. I will tell them it was wrong. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. Thank you, I said. I will see you tomorrow, she said, and the line clicked dead. I put the phone down. The house was quiet. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across my living room floor. The anxiety that usually plagued me before a family gathering, the frantic need to please, the terror of doing something wrong, was gone. In its place was a calm, heavy certainty. I walked over to my table. I looked at the manila envelope marked, "If you lie." I opened this. I looked at the printed agenda. I looked at the email chain where my cousins Sarah and Mrs. Higgins had sided with me. I had stripped them of their greatest weapon, my silence. I had stripped them of their second greatest weapon, their united front, for the first time in my life. I was not walking into the lion's den as a meal. I was walking in as the lion tamer. I went to bed early. I did not toss and turn. I did not replay old arguments in my head. I closed my eyes and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, resting like a woman who had finally, irrevocably, chosen herself. I arrived at Crown and Cedar 15 minutes early. The hostess tried to lead me to the rectangular mahogany table in the center of the private room, the one with a clear head and foot, but I stopped her. That table was a chessboard designed for a king and his pawns. I was not playing chess tonight. I need a round table. I told her, my voice brooking no argument, and 5 chairs spaced exactly equidistant from one another. She hesitated, looking at the heavy furniture, but something in my expression must have told her that I was not the customer to debate with this evening. Within 10 minutes, the room was rearranged. There was no head of the table. There was no power seat. There was nowhere for my father to preside, and nowhere for my mother to hide. I placed a single printed copy of the agenda at each setting. Next to my own plate, I placed the thick manila envelope marked, "If you lie." I opened this. It sat there like a loaded gun on a velvet tablecloth. They arrived precisely at 7 o'clock. My parents walked in first, moving in that synchronized lockstep they used when facing the world. My father wore his navy blazer, the uniform of the misunderstood patriarch. My mother wore a soft pastel cardigan, projecting gentleness. Caleb followed, looking at his watch as if he had far more important places to be. Paige came last, her eyes red-rimmed, clutching her purse against her chest like a shield. They stopped when they saw the round table. My father frowned. The geometry of the room threw him off. He looked for the head of the table, found none, and settled for the chair directly opposite the door. My mother sat beside him. Caleb took the seat to her right. Paige sat next to me. No one ordered a drink. The air in the room was so thick with tension it felt difficult to inhale. My father cleared his throat. He placed his hands on the table, palms down, establishing ownership of the surface. "Michaela," he began, his voice dropping into the rich, baritone register he reserved for church readings and board meetings. "I want to start by saying that we are a family. Families are messy. We have our disagreements, but the bond of blood is stronger than any temporary conflict. We are here tonight to put this behind us, to offer you our forgiveness for the scene you caused, and to move forward in unity. It was a good speech. It was rehearsed, polished, and completely manipulative." I did not nod. I did not smile. I picked up my glass of water, took a sip, and set it down with a deliberate click. "Stop," I said. My father blinked. He was not used to being interrupted during the preamble. "Excuse me?" he asked. "We are not here to forgive my reaction," I said, my voice level and cool. "We are not here to discuss my tone, my exit, or my email to the extended family. We are here to address your behavior." I pointed to the paper in front of him. "That is the agenda." I continued. "Rule number 1, one speaker at a time. Rule number 2, no interruptions. Rule number 3, no character attacks. We stick to facts." Caleb scoffed. He threw the paper back onto the table without reading it. "This is ridiculous," he said, leaning back in his chair and crossing his arms. "You are treating us like employees. You are so sensitive. Michaela, you always have been. You take one little joke about a table and turn it into a federal case because you need attention." I turned my head slowly to look at him. I did not raise my voice. "That is a character attack." "Caleb," I said, "calling me sensitive is a dismissal, not an argument. Try again." He rolled his eyes. "I am just saying, rule number 2. I cut in sharp and fast. No interruptions. I have the floor." I looked around the table. My mother was gripping her napkin so tight her knuckles were white. Paige was staring at her water glass. My father was turning a shade of red that usually preceded an explosion. "I have one question to start this meeting," I said. "I want an answer, a real answer, not a platitude about space or seating arrangements." I locked eyes with my mother. Why was I, a 35-year-old woman with a successful career and her own home, assigned to sit at a plastic table intended for toddlers? Silence stretched out in the room. It was heavy and suffocating. A waiter came in to offer menus, took one look at our faces, and backed out immediately, closing the door behind him. My mother looked at my father. My father looked at the wall. "It was just a logistical issue," my mother said finally, her voice fluttering. "We told you, Mr. Sterling is very particular." "Stop," I said. I slammed my hand on the table. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Everyone jumped. Even Caleb sat up straighter. "Do not lie to me. Mom," I warned her. "There were 8 seats at the main table. There were 8 adults. You made a choice. Explain the choice." My mother's lip trembled. She looked cornered. She looked at me with a mix of fear and sudden, sharp resentment. The mask of the sweet Southern belle slipped, revealing the judgment that had always lived underneath. "Because you do not fit," she snapped. The words hung there, vibrating in the air. "Explain," I said. "You are not settled." "Michaela," she cried out, her voice rising. "Look at your sister. She is a wife. She is a mother. She has built a life. You are just floating. You are 35 years old and you are alone." I stared at her. The cruelty was breathtaking, but it was also clarifying. "So because I am single, I am a child?" I asked. "You are not fully grown," she said, and she believed it. I could see it in her eyes. To her, a woman without a husband was a half-finished sentence. You are playing at adulthood. Michaela, your job, your apartment, it is all just filler until your real life starts, until you have a family. I turned to my father. Is this your position as well? That my value is determined by my marital status? My father sighed. He looked disappointed. Not in her, but in me for forcing them to say the quiet part out loud. Success is family. Michaela, he said gruffly, that is the legacy. Money comes and goes. Titles at work? They do not mean anything. When we sit at that table, we are honoring the people who are building the future. Your brother, your sister, they are building legacies. You are building a resume. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. It was not pain. It was the final death of hope. I had spent years trying to impress them with promotions, with raises, with accolades. I had thought that if I just reached a high enough rung on the ladder, they would look up and see me. But they were not even looking at the ladder. They were looking at my ring finger. I see, I said quietly. So my career is a joke to you. Do not be dramatic, Caleb muttered. No one said it was a joke. We just said it is not the same as raising a family. I reached for the manila envelope. I slid my finger under the flap and tore it open. The sound of ripping paper was loud in the quiet room. I pulled out the stack of printed screenshots. I fanned them out on the round table, spinning them so they faced my parents. December 12th, 2023. I read from the top sheet. Group text between Mom and Dad. Michaela is talking about that promotion again. It is cute how seriously she takes it. Like playing store. I slid the next one forward. August 4th, 2024. Email from Dad to Uncle Steve. She is still single. We are worried. She focuses so much on this marketing nonsense to fill the void. It is sad. Really. She is becoming a spinster with a briefcase. I slid the third one. This was the one that hurt the most. Thanksgiving last year. Text from Caleb to Mom. Do we have to listen to her talk about her quarterly earnings? It is boring. Just put her at the end of the table so she can talk to the kids. They are the only ones who have time for make-believe. I looked up. My family was staring at the papers. My mother's hand was over her mouth. My father's face was gray. Caleb looked like he had been slapped. How did you get these? Caleb whispered. It does not matter, I said. What matters is that this is what you think of me. You do not just see me as single. You see me as a failure. You see my life, the life I have built with my own two hands, as a game of make-believe. I stood up. I placed my hands on the table and leaned in. I earn $150,000 a year. I said, my voice low and fierce. I manage a team of 40 people. I own my apartment in the city. I am not playing store. I am the most successful person at this table. And the only reason you cannot see that is because your definition of success is trapped in 1950. My father tried to speak. Michaela, you are taking these out of context. There is no context where calling my career playing store is acceptable. I shouted. I took a breath. I reined it back in. I sat back down. You wanted to know why I left. I said, I left because I am done being your punchline, and I am done being your prop. My mother was crying now, soft, weeping sobs, but they did not move me. I watched her cry and realized that she was not crying for me. She was crying because her cruelty had been exposed. She was crying because the mirror I was holding up showed her something ugly, and she could not look away. I have one more question, I said, looking at Paige. My sister looked up. Her face was pale. She knew what was coming. We have established why I was at the kids' table. I said, now I want to know about the guests, the Sterlings. Why were they really there? And why was it so important that I look small in front of them? My father stiffened. The gray in his face turned to a stark, terrifying white. That is enough. Michaela, he said, we are done here. We are not done, I said. Why were the Sterlings there? Dad? I looked at Daniel Rusk's empty chair in my mind. I thought about the financial documents. I thought about the leverage. But before I could speak, Paige cleared her throat. They were investors, she whispered. Paige, my father barked. She flinched, but she did not stop. She looked at me, her eyes filling with tears. They were not just friends. Michaela, they are investors. Dad's company is in trouble. He needed the Sterlings to buy in. He needed to show them a perfect, stable, traditional family image to close the deal. She took a shaky breath. "You were a risk," she said. "A single woman in her 30s with a loud career. They thought you would look modern, unstable. They wanted the Sterlings to see the successful son and the homemaker daughter. They needed you to be invisible." I sat back in my chair. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. It was not just prejudice. It was a pitch. I was not just a disappointment. I was a liability to their fraud. The kids' table was not a punishment. It was a quarantine. The silence in the private room at Crown and Cedar was absolute. Paige's confession that the dinner guests were investors, not friends, hung in the air like smoke. My parents looked at me, their faces masks of defensive panic, waiting for me to scream or cry about being used as a prop in their financial theater. But I did not scream. Instead, I reached for my phone and sent a single text message consisting of one word: now. The door to the private room opened. My family turned in their chairs. Standing in the doorway was Daniel Rusk. He was a man who wore his authority quietly, dressed in a charcoal suit that cost more than my father's car. He held a slim leather briefcase in his hand. He did not smile. He did not introduce himself to my parents. He simply walked to the round table, pulled up a chair that he had apparently grabbed from a nearby table in the main dining room, and sat down next to me. "Who is this?" my father demanded, his voice trembling with a mix of bluster and fear. "This is a private family meeting. This is my attorney," I said calmly. And this meeting just stopped being about feelings and started being about facts. Daniel placed his briefcase on the table. The click of the latches opening sounded like a judge's gavel. He pulled out a single document, stapled at the top corner, and slid it across the white tablecloth toward me. He ignored my parents entirely. "Michaela," Daniel said, his voice even and professional, "I need you to look at this document, specifically page 4. Did you approve the home equity paperwork for the property at 42 Oak Lane?" I blinked. I looked down at the paper. It was a loan application for a home equity line of credit, secured against my parents' house. It was dated 3 years ago. "I do not understand," I said, frowning. "I do not own the house on Oak Lane. My parents do. Why would I approve their paperwork?" Daniel reached over and turned the page to the signature block. "Because," he said, pointing to a line at the bottom, "you are listed as the supporting guarantor." I stared at the paper. There, in black ink, was my name, Michaela Hughes, and next to it was a signature. It looked like my signature. The loop of the M was high, the way I wrote it. The tail of the G swept underneath, but as I looked closer, the breath caught in my throat. The slant was wrong. It was too upright. It was a hesitation mark, not a fluid motion. I looked at the date next to the signature, November 14th, 2022. My mind raced backward, scanning my calendar. November 2022. Where was I? I was not in Richmond. I was not at my parents' house sitting at their kitchen table signing loan documents. I was in Chicago. I whispered. I looked up at Daniel, then at my parents. I was in Chicago for the Midwest Digital Marketing Conference. I said, my voice rising. I was on stage giving a keynote speech on November 14th. I have photos. I have flight records. I was 800 miles away. I looked at my father. He was not looking at me. He was staring at the tablecloth, his jaw clenched tight. My mother was gripping her water glass so hard I thought it might shatter. "You forged my signature," I said. It was not a question. My father's head snapped up. "It was a formality," he hissed, his face flushing a deep, ugly red. We needed the liquidity to bridge a gap in the business. The bank wanted a guarantor with a steady W-2 income and a credit score over 800. You were the only one who qualified. "So you stole my identity?" I asked, feeling the room spin. "You committed fraud against your own daughter?" "We did not steal anything," my mother cried out, jumping to his defense. "We paid the monthly installments. You never even knew. We were protecting you from the stress of it. We did it for the family." Michaela, if the business went under, we would lose everything. The house, the cars, everything. I looked at them, really looked at them, and suddenly the plastic table made terrible, sickening sense. This was not just about them thinking I was a child. This was about keeping me a child. If I was a respected adult, if I was an equal at the table, I might have asked questions about the family business. I might have asked why they were hosting so many lavish dinners if cash flow was tight. I might have checked my own credit report more aggressively, by treating me like a toddler, by sitting me at the kids' table and dismissing my career as playing store. They were conditioning me. They wanted me small. They wanted me compliant. They wanted me to be the silent resource they could mine for creditworthiness without ever having to give me a vote in how the money was spent. They did not hate me. They were using me. I looked at Paige. She was weeping silently, tears dripping off her chin. "Did you know?" I asked her. She nodded, unable to speak. "How long?" I asked. "Since the beginning," she choked out. "I overheard them panic when the bank rejected the initial loan. They were talking about your credit score. They said you owed them for raising you." The room went silent. The brutality of that sentence hung there. You owed them for raising you. As if my childhood was a loan I was expected to repay with my financial future. "And the Sterlings?" I asked, turning back to the dinner. The investors from last night. Paige took a ragged breath. "The loan is coming due," she whispered. "The balloon payment. They cannot make it. They needed the Sterlings to buy into the company to pay off the debt before the bank calls it in." "Before you found out." I sat back in my chair. I felt a strange sense of detachment, like I was floating above the room, the fancy dinner, the new car in the driveway, the expensive appetizers. It was all a lie. It was a desperate, frantic performance to hide the fact that they were drowning, and they had tied an anchor around my ankle to keep themselves afloat. Daniel Rusk cleared his throat. He looked at my father with the cold, predatory gaze of a lawyer who knows he has already won. "Mr. Hughes," Daniel said. "In the state of Virginia, loan fraud involving a sum of this magnitude is a Class 2 felony. It carries a prison sentence of up to 20 years. We have the flight records proving Michaela was out of state. We have a handwriting expert ready to testify that the signature is a forgery." My mother let out a strangled sob. My father looked like he was having a heart attack. The bluster was gone. The patriarch was gone. All that was left was a terrified old man who had been caught. "You would not," my father whispered, looking at me. "You would not send your own father to prison. You put my name on a $300,000 liability without my consent," I said, my voice ice cold. "You risked my home. You risked my career. You risked my future. And then you sat me at a plastic table and told me I was not a real adult. Michaela, please," my mother begged. Reaching across the table, her hand hovered over mine, but she did not dare touch me. "We are your parents." Daniel looked at me. He did not tell me what to do. He simply laid out the weapons. "You have 3 options. Michaela," he said. "Option 1. We file a police report tonight. The fraud investigation begins tomorrow. The bank will likely foreclose on the house immediately once the fraud is discovered." My parents flinched. "Option 2, Daniel continued. "We sue civilly for damages and removal of your name. It will be public. It will be messy, but you will be clear." "And option 3? I asked. Daniel leaned back. "Option 3 is we handle this right here. We use this document as leverage. We structure a binding agreement that protects you and forces them to fix this. On your terms." I looked at the document. I looked at the signature that was almost mine. If I sent them to prison, I would be the daughter who destroyed the family. The narrative would shift. I would be the villain again, just in a different story. And frankly, I did not want the guilt of watching my parents be handcuffed in their driveway. But I would not be their victim anymore. I would not be the ground beneath their feet that they stomped on whenever they needed support. I picked up the document. I folded it slowly. "I choose option 3. I said. My father let out a long, shuddering breath. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you." Michaela, do not thank me yet, I said. I leaned forward. The anger was gone. In its place was the cold, hard weight of authority. I am not doing this for you. I am doing this because I refuse to let your failure become my tragedy. But things are going to change, and they are going to change right now. I looked at Daniel. Draft the terms, I said. Daniel opened his laptop. The sound of his typing was the only sound in the room. First, I said, you will sell the second property, the one you are so proud of. The proceeds will go immediately to paying down the principal of this loan. My father started to protest. But that is my retirement investment. It is not your investment. I cut him off. It is an asset bought with fraud. Sell it. He closed his mouth. He nodded. Second, I continued, you will sign a legal admission of guilt regarding the forgery. Daniel will hold it in escrow. If I ever hear a single whisper about me being unstable, if I ever see a social media post asking for prayers because I am difficult, if I am ever treated with anything less than absolute respect, Daniel releases that document to the district attorney. My mother began to cry harder. That is blackmail. She sobbed. No, I said, that is accountability. You wanted to control the story? Now I control the story. Third, I said, looking at Paige, and this includes you. We are going to family therapy, a therapist of my choosing, and we are going to talk about why you thought it was acceptable to cannibalize your own child to save your image. I stood up. I picked up my purse. I looked down at the people who had raised me, the people I had spent my whole life trying to please. They looked small. They looked defeated. I am not sitting at the kids' table anymore, I said. In fact, until this debt is cleared and my name is off that title. I own the table. I turned to Daniel. Finish the paperwork. I said, do not let them leave until it is signed. I walked out of the private room. I walked through the main dining area of Crown and Cedar. I walked out into the cool night air. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with the adrenaline of someone who had just survived a crash and walked away from the wreckage. I had not burned the family down, but I had taken the matches out of their hands, and for the first time in 35 years, I knew they would never burn me again. 3 days later, we met again. This time, I did not choose a restaurant. Food implies social bonding, and I was done trying to break bread with people who were willing to break my financial future. We met in the conference room of Daniel Rusk's law firm. The room was encased in glass, soundproof, and colder than the restaurant had been. The table was a long, oval slab of marble that felt like ice under my fingertips. I sat on one side with Daniel. My parents, Caleb, and Paige sat on the other. The visual separation was intentional. It was plaintiff versus defendants. Even if we were not in a courtroom, I did not waste time with pleasantries. I did not ask how their drive was. I slid a document across the marble surface toward my father. It was 5 pages long, bound with a heavy staple. I had titled it, The Repair Plan. This is not a negotiation, I said, my voice flat and devoid of the tremor that used to plague me when I spoke to my father. These are the terms of my continued silence. My father picked up the document. His hands were shaking. He put on his reading glasses, a gesture that usually signaled his authority, but today just made him look old and frail. What is this? He asked. It is a roadmap out of the mess you created, I answered. Daniel leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. To summarize, Daniel said, his voice smooth and professional. Point 1. You will immediately initiate the refinancing of the property at 42 Oak Lane to remove Michaela's name from the deed and the loan. If traditional refinancing is not possible due to your debt-to-income ratio, you will liquidate assets, specifically the rental property in the West End, to pay off the principal balance in full within 90 days. My mother gasped. That property is your brother's inheritance, she cried, looking at Caleb. Caleb looked down at the table. He knew better than to argue with me today. Point 2. Daniel continued, ignoring her outburst. You will sign a sworn affidavit admitting to the forgery of the loan documents dated November 14th, 2022, This affidavit will be held in escrow by my firm. It will not be released to the district attorney unless you violate the terms of this agreement." My father looked up, his eyes narrowing. He tried to summon the ghost of the man who used to command rooms. "You would not do this to your own parents." "Michaela," he said. His voice was low, attempting to vibrate with disappointed morality. "You would not hold a criminal charge over the heads of the people who gave you life. That is unnatural. It is cruel." I looked at him. I did not blink. "You already did this to me," I replied. The sentence landed in the center of the room like a heavy stone. "You risked my home," I continued. "You risked my career. You risked my freedom. If that loan had defaulted and the bank investigated, I could have been implicated in fraud I did not commit. You did not care about what was natural or cruel when you needed a guarantor. You only cared about what was convenient." My father's jaw worked, but he had no rebuttal. The moral high ground he had stood on for 35 years had crumbled under the weight of his own signature on that forged document. My mother reached for the papers. Tears were streaming down her face. Real tears this time, fueled by the terrifying prospect of social ruin. "Michaela, please," she wept. "Can we just keep this private? We will pay the loan. We promise. But do not make us sign a confession. If people found out, if the church found out, it would destroy us. We can handle this within the family." I looked at her tears. A week ago. They would have broken me. A week ago. I would have apologized for making her cry. Today. I saw them for what they were. A defense mechanism designed to blur the lines of accountability. Privacy without accountability is just another kid's table. I said, "What does that mean?" she asked, wiping her eyes with a tissue. "It means you want the luxury of hiding your mistakes while I carry the burden of them." I said, "You want to keep me in the corner where no one can see the truth, just like you did at dinner. But I am not sitting in the corner anymore. If you want privacy, you buy it with accountability. You sign the paper. Or Daniel calls the district attorney this afternoon." Caleb shifted in his seat. He looked uncomfortable, his eyes darting between me and our parents. He tried a different tactic, the one he always used, minimization wrapped in a bribe. "Look, Michaela," he said, forcing a smile that looked painful. "We get it. We messed up, but we are fixing it. And listen, next time we have a dinner, you sit at the head of the table, okay? We will make a big deal of it. We will toast your promotion. We will make sure everyone knows you are the VIP." I almost laughed. It was such a pathetic, hollow offer that it bordered on comedy. "You think I want a chair?" I asked him. I leaned back, crossing my arms. "You still do not get it. Caleb, you are offering me a better seat on the Titanic. I do not want the head of the table. I want to know that the ship is not going to sink because you drilled a hole in the hull and used my name to patch it." I turned back to my father. "Point 3. I said, no more stories. If I hear one word about me being unstable, difficult, or fragile from Aunt Lorraine or anyone else, the deal is void. You will correct the narrative. You will tell the extended family that I am successful, competent, and that the distance between us is due to a private disagreement where you were in the wrong. But that makes us look bad." My mother whispered. "Yes," I said. "It does. That is the point. You have spent decades making me look bad to elevate yourselves. Now you are going to carry your own weight. Point 4. I concluded. If you want to see me again, at Christmas, at birthdays, at any event that isn't a legal proceeding, you go to therapy, family therapy, with a practitioner of my choosing." My father slammed his hand on the table. It was a weak echo of his previous power. "This is humiliation," he shouted. "You are trying to humiliate us. I am trying to have a relationship with you that is not based on fraud," I shouted back, my voice finally rising. Filling the glass room, I took a breath and lowered my voice. "I am giving you a path, Dad. I could have walked out of here and let the police handle it. I am staying. I am offering you a chance to repair this. But you have to do the work." He sat there, breathing heavily, his face red. He looked at Paige, seeking an ally. "Paige," he said, "talk to your sister. Tell her she is being unreasonable. Paige looked up. She had been silent for the entire meeting, twisting a ring on her finger. She looked at our father, then at our mother, and finally at me. She is not being unreasonable. Dad, Paige said softly. My father looked struck. What? She is right, Paige said, her voice gaining strength. We have done this to her for years. We minimized her job because it made Caleb look better. We called her unstable because it made us look like the normal ones. We used her credit because we thought she owed us. Paige looked at me, and her eyes were clear. I heard you. Paige continued, turning to our mother. I heard you tell Mrs. Sterling that Michaela was going through a phase when she got her director title. You did not want her to outshine the image you built. We used her success when we needed money, and we used her struggles when we needed pity. It is sick, and I am not doing it anymore. The room fell into a stunned silence. My parents looked at Paige as if she were a stranger, the united front, the impenetrable wall of family loyalty they had hidden behind for decades, had finally collapsed. My father slumped in his chair. He looked at the papers in front of him. He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen before. It was not anger. It was not disappointment. It was fear. But it was not the fear of a parent losing a child's love. He was not looking at me with longing. He was looking at me with the terrified realization that he had lost the pen. He was no longer the author of this family's story. He could no longer edit me out, crop me to the side, or write me as the villain. I held the pen now, and I was writing in permanent ink. Sign the papers. Dad, I said quietly. He looked at Daniel. He looked at the glass walls. He looked at the future that was closing in on him. With a shaking hand, he picked up the pen. 3 weeks after the papers were signed in the cold glass conference room, I hosted an early holiday dinner at my apartment. It was the first time my parents had stepped foot in my home in over a year. I had spent the morning preparing, not with the frantic anxiety of a daughter trying to impress, but with the calm precision of a woman setting a stage. My apartment did not look like a magazine spread. It looked lived in. There were books on the shelves that had actually been read. There were throw blankets on the sofa that were meant to be used, not just admired. And in the center of the dining area stood my table. It was a sturdy, dark wood table that I had expanded with 2 extra leaves. I had set 10 places. Every setting was identical. There was no fine china that terrified the children. There were no crystal goblets that cost more than a car payment. There were sturdy ceramic plates and water glasses that could survive a tumble. Most importantly, there was no folding table in the corner. There was no exile zone. I had sent a group text 2 days prior with a single, non-negotiable rule. Everyone eats together at the main table, or the dinner does not happen. My mother was the first to arrive. She carried a Tupperware container of her signature stuffing, her knuckles white as she gripped the plastic rim. She looked nervous. She looked like a guest who was unsure if her invitation had been sent by mistake. She stepped into the hallway and scanned the room. Her eyes went immediately to the dining area. She saw the 10 chairs. She saw the lack of a secondary table. She opened her mouth. The old script was right there on the tip of her tongue. Should we set up a space for the kids to... She started to say. Then she stopped. She caught my eye. She saw the look on my face, the look that reminded her of the affidavit sitting in Daniel Rusk's escrow account. She inhaled sharply. She swallowed the words. To sit. She corrected herself, her voice tight. The table looks lovely. Michaela, everyone will fit perfectly. Thank you. Mom, I said, put the stuffing in the kitchen. My father arrived next, trailing behind Caleb and his family. He stood in the doorway for a long moment. Usually, this would be the time he offered a critique. He would comment on the size of my apartment, or the neighborhood, or the fact that I was renting instead of building equity, an irony that was now so sharp it could cut glass. But today, he said nothing. He looked at the furniture as if he were afraid to touch it. He looked at me as if I were a stranger who held the deed to his dignity. He hung his coat up himself, careful not to ask for help. It was a small shift, but it felt seismic. The man who used to command the room simply by entering it was now checking the temperature before he dared to speak. We sat down at 6 o'clock. The dynamic was strange at first, fragile and tentative. Caleb sat next to me, overly polite, passing dishes with a desperate sort of enthusiasm. Paige sat across from us, looking tired, but relieved, and the kids, Liam, Noah, and Harper, sat amongst us. Liam spilled a little bit of cranberry sauce on the tablecloth within the first 5 minutes. My mother flinched, her instinct to scold, to banish him for ruining the aesthetic, flared up in her eyes. She looked at the red stains spreading on the white fabric. Then she looked at me. "It is okay, Liam," she said, her voice sounding forced and unnatural. "It washes out." I smiled. It was a terrifying smile, I am sure, because I saw her shiver slightly. "Exactly," I said. "It is just fabric. We are here for the people, not the linens." As the meal went on, the tension began to loosen, replaced by something that felt almost like normalcy. But it was a new kind of normal. It was not the performative perfection of my childhood. It was messy. The boys were loud. They asked questions. They interrupted. And for the first time, they were answered. They were not shushed. They were not told to go play in the other room while the adults talked about serious things. They were treated as human beings who had a right to occupy space. Halfway through the meal, Harper turned to me. She was sitting to my right, picking at her turkey. She leaned in close, so her voice was just a murmur under the noise of Caleb telling a story about his dog. "This is weird," she whispered. "Bad weird?" I asked. "No," she said, looking around the table. "Good weird. Grandma has not corrected my posture once, and Granddad actually asked me how school was." She looked at me, her eyes wise beyond her 14 years. "You did this," she said. "You changed the air in the room." I reached out and squeezed her hand. Boundaries protect more than one person. "Harper," I told her, "remember that. You never have to shrink to fit in a room that is too small for you." She squeezed my hand back. By the time dessert was served, a pumpkin pie that Paige had bought and my mother's apple crumble, the atmosphere had shifted from terrified compliance to actual engagement. My father was listening to Noah talk about dinosaurs. He looked bored. Yes, but he was listening. He was performing the labor of being a grandfather instead of just the figurehead. I tapped my spoon against my glass. The table went silent immediately. The trauma of the last month meant that when I asked for attention, I got it instantly. "I have an announcement," I said. My mother froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. I could see the panic in her eyes. She was terrified I was going to bring up the loan, or the forgery, or start reading text messages again. "I am not bringing up the past," I said, answering her unspoken fear. "I am talking about the future." I took a deep breath. I looked at the people who had raised me. I looked at the brother who had mocked me and the sister who had used me as a shield. I loved them, in a complicated, heavy way, but I knew that love was not enough to keep me safe. Proximity had always been their weapon. If I was close, I could be controlled. If I was close, I could be pulled back into the old patterns the moment I let my guard down. I have accepted a new position. I said, "I will be the vice president of brand strategy for a tech firm." Caleb's eyes widened. "That is huge." "Michaela, congratulations." "Thank you," I said. "The company is headquartered in Seattle." The silence returned, sudden and absolute. "Seattle?" my mother whispered. "But that is on the other side of the country. That is 3,000 miles away." "Yes," I said. "I move in January." My father looked at me. He understood immediately what this was. This was not just a job. This was an enforcement mechanism. I was removing myself from their sphere of influence. I was taking my success, my income, and my presence, and I was placing it out of their reach. "But what about holidays?" my mother asked, her voice trembling. "What about Sunday dinners?" I will visit, I said, on my terms, and I will stay in a hotel when I do. I looked at them, holding their gaze with a calm, steady pressure. This is what growth looks like, I said. I am not asking for your permission to leave. I am not asking for your blessing. I am telling you what my life is going to be. You can be a part of it, from a distance, with respect, or you can not be a part of it at all. The choice is yours. My mother looked like she wanted to cry, to beg, to use guilt to tether me back to Richmond. But she looked at the table where we were all sitting. She looked at the lack of a kid's table. She realized that the old tools did not work anymore. She took a shaky breath. She forced a smile. It was brittle, but it was there. We are proud of you, Michaela, she said. My father nodded. He cleared his throat. Seattle is a good city, he said. Good market. You will do well there. They were letting me go, not because they wanted to, but because they knew they had lost the power to make me stay. I raised my glass. To family. I said, to growth. And to finally refusing to sit where we do not belong. We clinked glasses. The sound was clear and ringing, a bell tolling for the end of an era. As I took a sip of wine, I looked at my parents. They were eating their pie, making small talk with the children, playing their parts in this new script I had written. They were behaving. They were respectful. They were, for all intents and purposes, the parents I had always wanted. But as the evening wound down and I watched them walk out the door, hesitating on the threshold to thank me for the meal, a question lingered in the quiet air of my apartment. It was a sharp question, one that would stay with me long after I boarded that plane to Seattle. Did they change because they finally understood my worth? Or did they change simply because I made it impossible for them not to? I suspect I know the answer, but as I locked the door and turned off the lights, I realized it did not matter. I did not need them to understand. I just needed them to respect the seat at the table that I had built for myself, and that was enough. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on whether you think my parents truly changed or if they were just forced to. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit the like button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear it.